Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and Brad Garlinghouse himself decided to record a video and release it yesterday evening, and I'm going to show you some of the interesting parts of that today and also give you my take on things. But one of the main things I got out of his video, not really, but one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting is that he's talking about how many people Ripple has hired. And I was sitting there thinking, so the entire world has been shut down for months now, and Ripple is hiring. That tells me a lot just in itself. But I thought that was pretty fascinating. I also thought it was fascinating the angle that Brad Garlinghouse was taking in this video, and you're going to see. But first, in order to set the stage for this, first, I wanted to show you this article from CNBC. The U.S. is officially in a recession. Will it actually become a depression? This is from a couple of days ago. Well, the unemployment rate, I believe, is or not. I don't know about the rate, but the numbers, I believe, are already larger than what happened in the Great Depression, from what I've seen. Excuse me. But so this kind of leads into what Brad Garlinghouse is talking about and what I think Ripple kind of sees is about to unfold with the economy at large as well as digital assets. But first, I wanted to show you this. Marcus Treacher had tweeted this out, and this is he had done a Ripple Insights. And there's our cargo containers again. Remember, that's what Chris Larson loves to talk about. He tweeted this out today. The global adoption of ISO 20022 is key for future payment interoperability. As a member of, I'm not going to keep saying the number, standards body, Ripple is helping define the future direction of cross-border payment standards to meet the needs of our customers worldwide. So I'm not going to go into that article, but we just wanted to let you know that he has a whole insights on that. Okay, now let's get to the Brad Garlinghouse, and I'm going to tell you what my impressions of this are. All right, X-Men XRP sent this to me, and we will. I got to pull up my notes here because I've got the times that I wanted to show you. First clip I wanted you to hear is from about the 2-minute mark.
United States alone. I expect it's going to continue to grow. And I think that, while probably necessary to prevent an even more significant macroeconomic calamity, it definitely is going to have an impact on the future. And I think will, I believe, result in the debasement of fiat currencies. And you are seeing that in some emerging markets already where the exchange rates have started to shift. But even here in the United States, it's a real factor. One visualization of this, and in history, looking back, is on the next slide, is something we saw happen in the Weimar Republic, which was what we now call Germany after World War I, where they printed money to, frankly, fund the war effort, and that resulted in massive inflation after World War I. In 1923, people literally, as this visual shows you, were carrying wheelbarrows full of printed Deutschmarks in order to buy a loaf of bread. I'm not that bleak of an outlook about the US dollar, but I do believe it would be disingenuous not to acknowledge that what's happening here right now will certainly have an impact over the coming years. And, we won't see it just kind of go away quickly, because the things we're doing now will have second and third order effects.
Now, I thought that was fascinating because if you've been listening to this channel for 2+ years, you know that I've said 1,000 times, this was all born out of the financial crisis. It's not a coincidence. Everything is tied together here, folks. Now, I find it fascinating. What this tells me is Brad Garlinghouse and Ripple, they believe that this is all what is going to cause people, at least on the front end, to start rolling this really head for the safe haven, which is digital assets. Now, don't forget, those of you that are new here, don't forget, um, there's several reasons that I've called XRP the one, but one of those reasons is that it's got a limited supply. It's 100 billion XRP. Bitcoin has that same feature. Stellar used to be the opposite. They were creating more Stellar, and then they changed that when they decreased the supply of XLM to 50 billion. So it's very important and very key that these digital the digital assets that are actually going to have a use, that they are also in limited supply. I've always thought that was one of my favorite features of all this. Well, what happens, and this is what we're going to talk about today. If Brad Garlinghouse is talking about it, these guys see that this is what's coming. In other words, people are hit today. I'm looking at the stock market right now. The Dow's down 865. They know that this crisis that has been going on is going to cause people to hit the exits, and they are setting this up for some of those exits to be Bitcoin and XRP and Ethereum and probably a handful of others. And I'll show you, and this is not just Brad Garlinghouse talking. I told you the interview I did with Greg Kidd. I'll show you where he mentioned something about this, and he also mentioned it in the call that I did before the interview with him, where I did a private call with him just to kind of get his temperature and let him get my temperature. He mentioned that he used to work for the Federal Reserve, and he said, why would you not own some XRP? There's only 100 billion. He made a reference to that not being that much when you think about it. And we talked yesterday about how Ripple, some of the first people at Ripple have 15 to 20 billion of those XRP. Well, when people hit the exits, and I'm going to show you here in a second where all this is going. But Brad Garlinghouse was not finished talking about this. I mean, he literally just showed you wheelbarrows of cash, folks. Okay. All right, and then we go to the 4 or so minute mark. Listen to this.
So keep that in mind. One of the things I will also talk about as we get things started is, as I was talking about the kind of debasement of currencies, when we saw in the global financial crisis, kind of 2008, 2010, depending on what time scale you want to use, you saw a lot of new deficit spending and inflationary dynamics. And that was very positive for gold, as you see in this chart. Gold was up about 100% over the years after the global financial crisis. And I think you're going to see crypto play a role like digital gold. And there's some data to support that as well. So the next slide talks about some specific examples where crypto as digital gold is kind of gaining momentum. It's also important to remember that Bitcoin was born in the wake of that global financial crisis of 2008, 2009. Gold has been a safe haven asset in lots of ways. It did drop during the beginning of the 2008 liquidity crisis, but then you saw it make a big run. And I think we're going to see a similar trajectory and similar opportunity around the crypto market overall. I think you're going to see kind of a basket of cryptos, which I also think creates a de-risk situation. On the next slide, this is kind of already started to play out. The S&P 500 year to date is down about 10%. Gold is up about 12%. The total crypto market is up more than 25%. You're seeing Bitcoin has led that rally, but I also think you're going to continue to see dynamics which are good for, as you've heard me say before, if it's good for crypto, it's good for Ripple.
So I thought it was really interesting that, and here's what the way I think this lays out. I think that Ripple sees this safe haven aspect and the fear, and I'm going to show you what traditionally, I've shown it before, but I'm going to show you traditionally what happens when you have fear in the traditional markets. And I believe Ripple knows that this is what's going to cause this transition into digital assets. And this will be on the front end of it. I believe that's why the Bitcoin people have created this whole drop gold campaign and to keep referring to Bitcoin as digital gold, because I think they think that is the first wave, and then people will come into these things, and then the XRP utility will increase over time, and then you'll have even more people piling in. Okay, So the next clip I'm going to go back to that safe haven talk here in a second. Well, you know what? I'll come back to the Brad video instead, we'll go. I wanted to show you where Greg Kidd was talking about this in my interview. He touched it right here.
XRP for their liquidity needs. That would create amazing practical demand for XRP all around the world. Just like there's only 21 million Bitcoins, if people want to have that in their portfolio as like a defensive asset, by the time all the different retirement funds, hedge funds, individuals buy just to have a little bit of extra of Bitcoin tucked away, that creates an overall aggregate demand for Bitcoin. Same is true for Ripple, although its purpose is not just like as a panic currency. It's for a very specific task, creating an alternative to the heavy liquidity needs for the current nostro vostro system of correspondent banking.
And one thing Greg Kidd said to me in the pre-interview, which I don't think would be a sacred thing, he had mentioned that he had worked at the New York or the Federal Reserve. He had worked there, years prior to joining Ripple, and he said that when he was at the Fed, he never in a million years would have thought that they would be printing trillions of dollars the way that they're printing now. And he was talking about that in reference to a good reason to hold XRP. Because look, this right here is the U.S. debt clock. It's at $26 trillion. Before the current crisis happened, this was like 23, folks. We're talking about $3 trillion locked on inside of the last couple of months. That is crazy. That just screams of collapse. And what do you, I think the plan all along has been to collapse this into a new system. And I believe that's what digital assets are. I don't think it's a coincidence Bitcoin came out during the financial crisis. Don't think it's a coincidence that Ripple all of a sudden pops up in 2012. I just don't. Well, in crises, traditionally, and this is important for any of you that have never seen me go over this before, the safe haven assets, that's a reference to places where the money goes when people get scared. And traditionally, those safe havens have been gold, precious metals like gold and silver, okay? Treasury bills, okay? That's where people have traditionally gone. Defensive stocks, and that's kind of like one of the lesser places that we would go. Cash, the cash is the first place everybody goes. Then if they think we're in this for a longer term problem, it's gold, treasury bills. And then safe haven currencies also, like the Swiss franc. Swiss franc, that kind of sounds familiar. It reminds me of this.
The country could have its own fiat, but still use one of the big four. You have lots of
like
examples.
Montenegro, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But I think then where the digital assets fit in, like things like XRP and Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're kind of in that mid-range. They become, I think, like the Singapore dollar or the Swiss franc. And
right? How about that? And so these safe havens, this is on safe havens the way they've always been. Well, you tell me, these people who've been going into U.S. debt as a safe haven, at what point in looking at this do they say, I don't feel so safe anymore in that U.S. debt? At what point? What is it going to take? Is it going to take $10 trillion piled on in a couple of months? Because that's where, we're already in the cuckoo for Cocoa Puff stage. I mean, how much crazier do you want it to get? I believe that the U.S. government has always known that this was crazy, and I believe that they were a part of the creation of the digital asset space because they knew that it would have to be rolled into something different. That's what I've believed since I really started looking at this. It's the only thing that's ever made any sense. All right, so let me make sure I'm not. Okay, yeah, we'll get to that later. So I just wanted to illustrate that point. Let me delete some of these and get these going for you. We'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of Greg Kidd, and then we'll go back to Brad Garlinghouse. So a couple of more things I wanted to play you from Brad Garlinghouse from the video, from his little thing here. Watch this.
Digitally, and I generally think that's good for us. I think you're seeing central banks more than ever thinking about how digital assets could be used that also is anything good for us as we work with some of the central banks around the world. On the next slide, it's worth spending a minute in understanding how I think that you're going to see another wave of correspondent banks de-risking. So internally, I think everyone understands well, one of the key things that we are solving through on-demand liquidity is the mitigating the need to pre-fund and for correspondent banks to be able to facilitate payments without some of that pre-funding. We saw in 2008, there really was a first wave of correspondent banks changing they limited access to money transmitters and remittance providers, resulted in slower, more expensive payments in some of the traditional networks. But it definitely sparked a big boom in digital remittances. And I think what we will see happen now is banks are going to reassess the cost of being in some of these markets where the overhead, both in terms of cost of capital, but also the overhead in terms of compliance costs. And I think they'll reassess that and decide what they want to change. Remittances are relatively small volumes for some of the biggest correspondent banks. And I think we're going to see another wave of that de-risking, which again, as I said, I think is opportunity for Ripple. One manifestation of that is that I think it has helped the product market fit of some of our core products. So we have always had the tip of our spear target customers that are digital first. I think the value proposition of on-demand liquidity, as I was just describing, or as we call it, ODL, only increases. This is a quote from one of our current customers, describing ODL as a lifeline, given their own liquidity dynamics. The other thing that's been interesting to watch as we went through some of the volatility over the last handful of weeks is you saw in mid-March some really dramatic volatility in the Philippine peso, where actually some of our customers, the only way they were able to get liquidity into and out of the Philippines was through ODL. We certainly did have strong momentum as we kind of finished up Q1, just to give you
It's almost as if the crisis is the perfect scenario to really illustrate what the value of Ripple's products. It's kind of crazy. All right, so 10, and then the last clip I want to show you is at the 10:30 mark.
We were able to finish the quarter on a strong note. It's certainly not lost upon me that, and I don't think, frankly, many people in the crypto community, that the majority of the Bitcoin mining power is in China. And particularly when we see the dynamics going on in the COVID world we're living in, those dynamics are only going to get more accentuated, I think, during the balance of 2020. And I think it's important for really the globe to understand that Bitcoin mining power today is controlled in China, and what are the implications of that as we look at many governments around the world taking a very strong stance about Huawei and the build out of 5G mobile networks. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I do think a priority for us throughout Q2 and really the balance of 2020 will be to continue to push to get more clarity, frankly, not just for XRP and all of the participants in the XRP ecosystem, but really for crypto more broadly. Moving to the next slide.
Okay. One of the things that he harped on in the video, and I didn't play the first clip, but he was really harping on I think Brad Garlinghouse seems to be really scratching his head as to why everybody is still talking about Bitcoin against the backdrop of most of the mining being controlled in China, and against the backdrop of the how the mining, the energy consumption, and the how it could affect the environment. I think he's kind of scratching his head. He seems to be somewhat scratching his head as to why are people not putting all this together? And the fact that this technology is proof of work does not work. Well, and I think that he rightly so is like, here you got XRP, the Rolls Royce over here, and you got this Bitcoin Pinto. And why are people still looking at this Pinto? And why are they looking at it in terms of a safe haven? I've said before on this channel, XRP is 1,000 times better of a safe haven than Bitcoin, and I'll tell you why. Here's why. You got XRP over here. I can store $10,000 in XRP, or I can store $10,000 in Bitcoin. If I put it in Bitcoin, when the time comes, let's say that the market really goes crazy and the prices, let's say that the Bitcoin goes up 10% and XRP goes up 10%, and the market's really humming along, and I decide I want to sell my Bitcoin. If I want to sell my Bitcoin, I can sell it. Okay. Now, but I can sell it once I sell it. If I want to move it during high traffic times, it may take 3 hours for me to move that Bitcoin. Doesn't matter what the market's doing with XRP. I can send it in 2 or 3 seconds like that. And it doesn't matter if the market's booming or not booming. The XRP, but it's the same thing in terms of a safe haven. If I can store it in one place where when I'm ready to move it, I can move it in 3 seconds, or another place where when it's time to move, both are limited in supply. Remember, both are limited in supply. $10,000 in XRP, $10,000 in Bitcoin. There's only a certain amount. Never will be more. Same type thing. Difference is I can move it twice as fast with the XRP than I can with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin could take as much as 3 hours if things are going. So I think he's scratching his head the same way any of us that really know what's going on are scratching our head. Why are people still even talking about Bitcoin? It's dinosaur. Okay. Now, XRP Crypto Wolf had done a couple of summaries of this. He said, Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse said the current state of the global economy is placing Bitcoin and the overall crypto markets in a prime position for a bull run rally. We're going to continue to focus on how we use XRP as a really effective tool for payments. And then he also tweeted this one. RippleNet saw an 85% increase between Q4 2019 and Q1 2020. Brad said central banks are actively working on integrating digital payments, which he describes as a good trend. All right, and now let's move along to the next thing. This is big, in my opinion. DJ Peter Voss sent me this. Bank of New York Mellon. Caroline Butler joins BNY Mellon as global head of custody. BNY Mellon has announced that Caroline Butler has joined BNY Mellon, global head of custody, reporting directly to Roman Regelman, head of asset servicing and digital, and will be based in New York. She's reporting to the head of asset servicing and digital. Now, do you remember that company called PolySign? Remember that? Well, one of the subsidiaries of PolySign is Standard Custody and Trust. Do you remember? And remember, at PolySign, one of the guys there, we were talking about him this week, his whole career was at BNY Mellon. And we also covered a few weeks ago that there was also another guy from BNY Mellon who had retired and is on the company documentation for this Standard Custody, which is a subsidiary of PolySign. I've got an Igloo still for sale in Georgia. If you think that this right here has nothing to do with this right here, they got 2 people from BNY Mellon that are on the documentation for this company right here. And you got this woman she's going to work for this guy, head of asset servicing and digital. BNY Mellon has been involved in this. And remember, we'll rewind a little bit more. Brad Garlinghouse was just talking about the global financial crisis and how Bitcoin was born out of the financial crisis. Do you remember what I showed you a long time ago? BNY Mellon was the company that was put in charge of handling TARP for the federal government when they were doing the bailouts during the financial crisis of 2000, whatever, 8, 9, whatever. BNY Mellon was one of the only companies that was stable enough. And so the U.S. government chose them. And now here we are. Fast forward to now, we're in this new crisis, and Brad Garlinghouse is talking about safe havens, and all of a sudden, PolySign has created this subsidiary, Standard Custody and Trust, with 2 BNY Mellon people on it, and now we've got someone being hired as global head of custody, and they're working for the head of asset servicing and digital. Okay, I mean, come on, folks. Now, I wanted to give a congratulations. This is Waleed Benothman. I'm not sure if I say that right, This is a guy that I referred to as Rico Suave. This guy he was in sales for Ripple, and I met him. Mr. B and I met him on a bus when we went to Swell in Singapore. This guy was one of those people. He walks on the bus, and he immediately makes everybody on the bus feel like they're the most important people in the world. He's the most. I called him Rico Suave because he's the most smooth sales guy I've ever met in my life. And Mr. B got the exact same impression. So now he is moving on. He said, I made a big professional leap this month and joined the growing team at Curve as the new EMEA managing director. I want to thank Ripple for an amazing time and wish the very best. Now, another interesting thing about Curve, folks. Curve is a digital asset custody company, similar to what PolySign is, okay? You hear me on this channel all the time talking about iTrustCapital and how you can go and you can roll your 401k into an iTrustCapital IRA. Well, and by the way, that's in the description of all the videos I do. There's a coupon code where you can get a month free if you decide to go do that. It allows you to invest in digital assets inside of an IRA. Okay, I have a Roth IRA there. Anyway, Curve is who does the custody for iTrustCapital. So, and Curve is also one of the investors in Curve is the Digital Currency Group, which also is an investor in Ripple. Everything's tied together in this space, folks. So anyway, congratulations to Waleed. I know he's going to do some selling for someone because this guy is a sharp cat. Let's finish this video up with another hilarious installment from XRP, the Standard Productions. He said, subtle XRP moon clues spotted in Garlinghouse video. He's talking about the Brad Garlinghouse video that I just showed you. But I didn't see these, but he's showing moon boots. Look at these pictures. He added, there was a pair of moon boots in the background, some blocks that said 589. And then he showed over here on the right side, you've got the bear. And over here, it's like Brad Garlinghouse is trying to solve puzzles or whatever. I just thought, this guy's a trip. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, tell your friends and family that Brad Garlinghouse had some subtle XRP moon clues that were in his video. I just missed them until I saw XRP, the Standard Productions coil post here. Go give him a follow, by the way, at XRP_productions. I follow him now as well. Thanks for listening.